looking up Main Street toward the UVM. The idea is, and the concern or where the proposal came from is on the right-hand side of, or the south side of Main Street is a significant number of encumbrances. These are people's houses. These are front porches. It is a significant elevation change to where the O'Brien Salon was. So there are features in the right-of-way that are really difficult to say we want that space back, because taking people's houses in front of houses is not going to make Main Street great. So the compromise to retain parking, to retain the travel lanes, the green belts, was to propose the shared use path. One of the mitigation strategies or things to look at is this dimensional numbers. Wow, I didn't like that. The numbers at the bottom of the screen, you know, really reviewing the inches. It's a game of inches sometimes in our constrained right-of-ways about what can fit and what can't fit. The parking study would also potentially be able to inform restoration of a dedicated facility in here, and that maybe the parking on the south side of the street isn't necessary in this one block. And then the space can go back to restoring separated, dedicated, protected bike facilities. So those are some of our ideas and directions that we're moving with the feedback that we've heard. We've been to the Parks Commission earlier this month as it relates to changing the tree belt facilities and the green spaces that do exist into other items. It's where their purview rests. We were at the Church Street Marketplace Commission this morning so that we could speak with them as it relates to the intersection of the Church Street Marketplace, which is actually some bricks that appear on Main Street. That is their purview. And then we are here tonight to look for support of the DPW Commission. It's a little bit of an oddity in the fact that we're not seeking any regulatory changes at this moment, but we do recognize this is a monumental project with significant changes to our community, and do want to make sure that we provide early opportunities for your voice. So in front of you is the motion that we have for the City Council on Monday, and welcome discussion at this point.
All right, thank you for that introduction. Open up to the commission at this point. Commissioner Barr.
Thanks. So I'm in support of complete streets. I think that it's much needed in our city, and I've always viewed roads as something for everybody to use as mobility, not just for cars. And it's met with a lot of difficult discussions with people, friends of mine, and people that I don't know that tend to voice their opinion. I'm very much in support of trying to keep contiguous bike lanes so that there's not a lot of changing back and forth. I know that sometimes it's hard for pedestrians, it's hard for cyclists, it's hard for vehicles because there's some changes there, even if you get used to it. I'd very much be in support of having the consultant, is that what it is, consultant, that you're to look at, do the parking study and see if we can move the parking so that we can have a bike lane on both sides. I think that would be, there's so many people that are going to start biking now. Another thing that I hear a lot of, well, I hardly see any bikes out there, so why are you going to put in a bike lane? Well, if you put in a bike lane and make it safe and inviting for cyclists, then there will be more cyclists. Colchester Avenue is a perfect example of that. And Jason Stuffle has done some good numbers and counts, and I see him posting on Bikeable Burlington all the time. That, you know, now there's 15 bikes within an hour going by, and I use it myself. So I think that if we put it there, they will come. And maybe we can look at some options in the winter if there is a huge reduction in cyclists of trying to come up with some 30-minute stopping zones or something like that. But we'll see. So those are my comments right now.
Thank you. Vice Chair O'Neill-Vivanco.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Director Spencer, for conversations about this. My concerns are really the kids coming from Edmonds L and Edmonds Middle and the enormous conflict just as these beings with developing brains move on their bikes and move with their bodies down the street and up the street, that this is a huge conflict zone on this shared use path. So I appreciate your highlighting that this motion is really to look at the proposed curb-to-curb width and dealing with the parking, that it's not about necessarily the final say on the separated and protected lanes. I do feel very strongly about the separated and protected lanes. I do hope that we can come up with a motion that would include, that would really articulate evaluating all options to continue the eastbound dedicated separated, I'm fogging up, protected bike facility on the blocks between Winooski and South Union, and that you will evaluate to really spell out how we are going to reallocate the public right-of-way, moving from the parking on the street to exploring other options to identify parking spots. There are plenty. I did identify 4 on my bike ride today on Union Street in front of the old YMCA that are not metered, that are being used. So if nothing else, we should put meters there. So I found 4 spots today.
Yep.
I'll go on a ride tomorrow and see if I can find a couple more. So I understand. I don't want to, beat this any further, because I really understand. You got the same emails that we did, and we've been in conversation. So thank you for really working to maintain our great streets. As one of my kids, I think most of my family wrote in. Pablo, was that true? Except for the dog. But as one of my kids, my oldest, said to me, "Don't make this a not great street. Let's make it a great street." And this is a kid who spent her, middle and elementary school years at Edmonds, and is a cyclist as well. So, thank you for that.
So yeah, we've even into minutes just before this meeting, not your family, other community members have been still providing feedback around the shared use path. So we do have a proposed amendment, and is very wordy for the amended motion, to be respectful to that. And if you want, I will read it if and when ready. Okay.
Yep, and this was developed in conversation with Commissioner O'Neill Vivanco and trying to get at some of the concerns that we have heard.
Okay, so in addition to our city council portion, which is to recommend to the city council approve the Great Street, Main Street concept designs proposed curb-to-curb width of 40 feet, reducing from an existing width of 50 to 70, and effectuating the conversion of on-street parking configuration from diagonal to parallel, it would be amended with strong guidance to evaluate all options to, 1, continue eastbound dedicated separated and protected bike facility on the block between Winooski Avenue and Union Street. 2, relocate any impacted parking spaces to other locations along the corridor, adjacent to the corridor, or removed as a last resort. And 3, have DPW staff return to the commission and city council with updated plans later this year. I apologize. It's not my favorite PDF program, but we can edit this live. So,
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Mhm.
Commissioner Overby.
Just so people can hear me, I'm going to pull the mask down. I have communicated some concerns in advance, just to make sure that everybody had something in writing, and all the other commissioners also have that. But for the, I want to repeat a little bit of them for the sake of the public that hasn't read those materials, if you're okay with that.
Yep.
Absolutely.
I really have a concern that the thing called an intersection evaluation matrix is not really adequate for making the determination of what the intersection should be on Main Street before we make a decision to approve this plan. And as you all know, I'm very supportive of roundabouts as a safe intersection treatment, but I think the objective way to deal with whether they should be signalized or four-way stop or roundabout is to actually objectively do the proper scoping and not a homemade intersection evaluation matrix. That's my perception on this. So that's my recommendation, and I do want to continue with what that would do is that would actually give us some numbers about metrics of what the delays are for different treatments at the intersections, for the vehicles, for the pedestrians, for the bicyclists, how long they queue up, what the distances are, motor vehicle energy and CO2 emissions, projections on kind of injuries based on the history of the injuries in that intersection, and also equity of treatment for different populations. So I'm just going to quickly read the recommendation that I have in writing, so if somebody could get that online. Right now, there are 4 intersections on Main Street, which is being that we're talking about here, that are in the high crash zone in Vermont, based on the 2012-2016 data. Number 1 high crash location is that Main Street and South Winooski intersection. The number 24 is the Main and St. Paul intersection. Number 31 in the whole state of Vermont is the Main Street and Battery Street intersection, and then 52nd in the state is the highest crash location is Main Street and South Union. So we have 4 of them in the area that we're talking about doing a generational improvement on the street. So that's a concern that we really can't. I don't think you can safely say we're going to do signalized intersections based on a intersection evaluation matrix, which I'm not sure where that comes from as far as the requirements or the structure. But okay, so there's a few reasons why I'm going to try to sell you on roundabouts. Number 1, roundabouts actually are 24/7 traffic calming. They create a safer intersection for pedestrians, for bicyclists, still facilitating smooth flow of traffic. The negotiation between the value is the negotiation between vehicles happens separately from the value of the intersection, the interrelationship of vehicles with pedestrians, and the reason that is you're slowed down, you are able to get eye contact with another vehicle when you're entering as a vehicle, and you're having eye contact with humans and bicyclists and people that are trying to get through that intersection. That's a very important factor that you don't get with stoplights. With signalized intersection. Roundabouts actually also avoid forced greenhouse gas emissions, which are caused by vehicles idling at the signals when their movement is prohibited, even when there are no competing vehicles or pedestrians waiting to cross. And what really, I think one of the reasons this isn't a good thing either is that the intersection waiting experience that we've all had, you're sitting at an intersection, there's no cars coming, and you're in the car, and there's no pedestrians, whether you're a pedestrian or car, you really, you almost want to just forget the signals and just go. And that's really an unsafe thing to be encouraging people to do that. But that experience of, intersection waiting, and we all been there. So, okay, compared to roundabouts, the signals actually induce drivers to step on the gas when they see a yellow light. And I'm sure we've all seen that. Maybe we're all polite drivers, but I see it all the time. That's what causes accidents. People step on the gas at a yellow signal. So signalize things. A roundabout, you don't have that. The psychology isn't there to I've got to get through this now on the yellow light. And then you have somebody getting T-boned. So, or hitting a pedestrian who's trying to cross at the cross side. The roundabout, compared to a roundabout, a signalized intersection leaves pedestrians vulnerable to being hit by turning vehicles. Compared to a roundabout, a signalized intersection leaves motorcyclists and scooter riders vulnerable to being hit while turning or being rear-ended while waiting to turn. And that's really, a really important thing to remember as well. You can't avoid that with a signalized intersection. It doesn't happen at a roundabout. And finally, the other thing that I think we keep forgetting is, yes, maybe roundabouts are more complicated, they're more expensive to get going in the first place, but they are less expensive to maintain. They don't require all the same electricity costs as a signalized thing does. We'll have some lights maybe, but not the same as lights. signals, and their mechanical repairs and equipment upgrades don't have to happen year after year, which happen with signalized intersections. So those are the reasons why I really want a proper study of those, at least those 4 dangerous intersections to be done, so that you can confidently say the signalized intersection will not have the problems that seem to occur at all other signalized intersections. There's some statistics about how many crashes have happened at all those intersections that were prepared by Tony Reddington, who has, obviously we all are familiar with probably Tony, who's done a lot of work on roundabouts and transportation things. So there's also something that I have provided a few times to the Public Works Department and the Public Works Commission that relate to a roundabout in Athens, Ohio, that is similar to what we can see, and it shows you the dimensions, it shows you how it works smoothly, it shows you how the pedestrian crossings are separated from the place where vehicles actually are entering a roundabout. So it's a really good way for people to visualize it, and I'm really happy you guys, congratulations, you're working on the one at the Shelburne Street, so that's going to help people also visualize that as well. So there are other documents there that I posted. Thank you for, listening to that, but I really think that this is an important thing. There's millions of dollars being spent. It really needs to be done properly. I don't want it to be rushed through. I can't support this plan tonight because of the fact that it's not been carefully addressed what the intersections are going to be like, and it doesn't feel right to me that we wait to find out what those will be at some point in the future after you've already committed to a plan. It would just make it almost impossible or very difficult to actually implement something like these safe roundabouts at some of those dangerous intersections. So that's my input. Thank you.
Yep. I do want to respond to a few of those things and maybe propose some ideas, but I do have up on the screen, it was some of the text from one of the emails that you sent as it related to what you were asking for. So I have that up for people to see. There are a lot of the items that you mentioned that you felt like would be missing from the matrix that are being included. It's just, it's kind of in an abbreviated function. The operational analysis of the intersections as a roundabout or as a signal is being done. The queue lengths, the delays, those are all part of what will be available with the effort that the consultant is doing. If there are items like the CO2 emissions that we want to add in, we can do that. If that makes that more of a complete piece of information for review and consideration of the commission. The matrix is actually usually a part of a scoping study, so it's not something that's, we're making up to do in place of. We are reducing down the scope of a scoping study to kind of the content of the decision-making process. The environmental and other impacts on the community are being done through NEPA. So this project is going to go through federal review because it does have other grants. So some of those other components that we are not asking to be done as part of the intersections is being done throughout the rest of the corridor, which is why we felt this was an appropriate step. But that's just to be able to speak to that. As it relates to why we are in front of everybody now at this point in the project, the change from diagonal to parallel is going to be a significant change on the community, and it's really 2 different directions that the project could take time to go in. And it's challenging with our TIF funding and the limitations on time that come with being able to use those funds. It's an opportunity that we don't want our community to lose to have such a significant investment in the downtown. And so that's why we are asking our public bodies and our stakeholders to really help us with the feedback at this turning point as to whether we can move the parking from being diagonal to parallel and then continue on in our process. There's still lots of design to do, and we are still going to be engaging our community on a lot of different items on this. And so I'm sorry to have to put something in front of you that you don't feel is ready to be acted upon, but it's an important step, unfortunately, for this one.
Thank you. Commissioner Montano.
Hey, thanks so much for coming back and addressing these 3 kind of big things. So my first question is actually about what is in it for the Public Works Commission in the future. So if we make this motion tonight, what other kinds of things would we be asked to act on as this process moves forward? Is it actually changing any parking at all? once those specifics are worked out, really what other kinds of opportunities will we have for input after tonight is my first question.
Yep. So it's an interesting situation that this one is in. The way that the regulations are written in Appendix C is that it permits metered parking on basically each side of each block, but doesn't necessarily say what type of parking it is, where it's located, how far from a corner is probably the best that you get in Appendix C. So knowing that that seems a little light on the regulation side, that's why we are certainly here tonight to talk about the parking laws. What will happen in the future is as we come to this understanding with the community after the vote with the council, we will be working with businesses and other community members about the organization of the regulations on the street. So where 15-minute parking is, where accessible parking is, how truck loading is organized. I can't even think of all the things that have been going through my head about the way that Appendix C would have to get updated. But there's going to be a lot of different items, trying to be a little bit more innovative with the way that the parking is arranged in the corridor to try to help mitigate the parking loss. There could also be changes to the turning lane configurations, although I don't think that that's a regulatory change, but it's certainly information that we are going to have conversations about, and that will come out of the intersection findings.
I would add just one thing, that if there is a change from a signalized intersection to a roundabout, that also would need to be reflected in Appendix C. So these regulatory changes, once we do additional design and have that additional engagement with the public, we will be coming back to you with specific changes in Appendix C for your consideration and approval.
Okay, yeah, that is definitely great. And I'm 100% in support of the separated dedicated bike lanes for the length of the entire corridor. And I just want to cycle back really quick to that top block at South Union, between South Union and South Winooski. And the thing is that currently I don't think that there's parking on that south side of the street. If I'm not mistaken, I was just looking at Google Street View, but it's a wider breadth of the street itself, and there's 2 lanes. So sort of, do you know what kind of went into the decision of putting in that parallel parking on that top block on the south side? Is it in a way to make up for parking being lost elsewhere? Or I just kind of want to know, in the process so far, what went into that decision?
Yeah, there should actually be 6 spaces on that south side right now. But they might be really faded in any street view that you're looking at.
Yes. Yeah, no, I do definitely see it now.
They are.
Oh, all right. Yeah, just a little further down there. All right.
Closer to the Union Street side.
All right. Fantastic. Well, I certainly look forward to digging into the details more. And I just want to thank everyone one more time. I hope we could come to a resolution tonight that kind of satisfies everyone and kind of sets a good path going forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Bose.
Thank you. So many of the questions and concerns I had going into this have been raised by previous commissioners, and I really appreciate what the department has done already to try and engage with the feedback. I recognize that it's a very obviously complicated, technically, politically, culturally, etc. I appreciated seeing both of the amended parts of the resolution. I'm certainly satisfied, for example, with the type of evaluation of the intersections that's being proposed. In terms of this, the shared use proposal and the kind of response that it's engendered, and of course, in addition to the very vocal responses that we have seen, not only from Vice Chair O'Neill Vivanco's family, but from many others as well, including not only those expressing one particular perspective, but also the very real concerns around the loss of parking, loading, et cetera, all of these other kinds of things for businesses along there. I feel generally fairly comfortable with what has been proposed in terms of moving forward and the language in the amended motion. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit to why some of these perspectives might have been missed in the, what you've laid out as a fairly extensive public consultation process. And I guess I was wondering about this in particular in the consultants' focus groups, because I mean, what became kind of conspicuous in its absence is the lack of a focus group with, for example, cyclists who might be, I'm just thinking, given the kind of advocacy organizations who have spoken up, I was just wondering if some kind of attempt had been made to incorporate those sorts of perspectives into the design, either previously, or is that part of what's kind of going on now in terms of the businesses, given what we've heard as feedback, the difference between businesses that are talking about accessibility of customers, others in terms of loading and unloading and things like this. I'm just wondering kind of where this goes from here, because we could simply take, here's a bunch of pro views, here's a bunch of con views, and how do we actually sort through that as we move forward? So I'm wondering, in this kind of in this process that you continue to outline for us, what do you kind of see as next steps in terms of incorporating some of these different views?
Yep. So to speak to the engagement, we have given presentations in front of the Bike Walk Council. I was in front of them twice talking about Main Street. We've also had conversations at various different business groups, the Downtown Action Group, the Waterfront Action Group, where we've encountered local motion on a few occasions. So there's, and our community is very full of bike groups. And oddly, I think our mobility support group had a majority were actually bikers as their preferred modes of transportation, with all except for the extreme years, so extreme months of the season. So I think the challenge with that is in the early part of the concept, we never proposed the shared use path. The shared use path came as our survey data came in throughout the corridor, which was after our initial engagement, recognizing the significance of the encroachments on that block of those homes and businesses, and the concern that we're going to have to make choices to compromise what's there. It's paired with the fact that we heard a lot of early engagement and still continue to hear concerns over the parking loss. And so we asked our consultant to find a way. Their early concept showed no parking on the south side of that block when they shared it with staff, and we challenged them to find a way to still try to include a little bit of everything in some sort of compromised way. They proposed the shared use path as one of those options. So
that's helpful. I mean, but it to some degree raises for me this kind of question that as we go through this process in which we invite the maximum amount of feedback that we can get, and we ask for feedback from very different kinds of interests. When the consultants presented their plan, and I remember asking a few questions about how you put together the different kinds of focus groups and whatever. It was also very clear that different users of or different citizens in the city are going to have different kinds of needs, priorities, demands, etc. And what concerns me to some degree is that when we're responsive to those sometimes contested needs and try to arrive at compromises, and then plans change, that if it engenders the kind of pushback that we then get over a half a block of a city or a block of city, whatever it is, it makes it a very it makes it challenging for staff. It makes it challenging for the department. It makes it challenging to continue to move forward. And so I'm wondering about, this, how we put forward what other members of the public have raised the idea of just transitions, right? Like, how do you actually make that idea of just transitions front and center so that it is not the appearance of one particular kind of vested interest that takes precedence over others? I don't know that you have an answer to this, but I just want to express this as kind of a concern. I think that what you have suggested here, again, offers us the ability to bring in different perspectives, even in this kind of like, okay, we're going to keep looking at this. But at some point, when push comes to shove and we say like, okay, whose interests are going to be compromised? I don't know how we take that next step. I would, what you've suggested in terms of the intersection analysis is, I think, really promising because it does try and bring in as many factors as possible. But I would say that in this particular case as well, we've had very vocal support of particular views, but I think it's important to try and incorporate as many of them as possible. I'll leave it at that. I am in support of these proposed amended motions. Thank you.
Yeah, you raise a difficult point, and what I've learned through some of these projects in our downtown is that usually the right design in the end is a bit of a compromise. I think that the steps outlined in the proposed amended motion, hopefully, I mean, we would do them as staff anyway, but it writes it down as a commitment to the community that we will investigate the different ways to allow these the dedicated separated protected bike facility, its fair chance to exist, and what that will mean, looking at other priorities in the corridor as a way to keep that feature. In many of our large projects, the city council will ask, we're going to approve this under this condition. And that's very much what this feels like. A lot of this feels pretty good, but we do want to have, a closer look at this and come back and see us about it. So I think that in a 6-block redesign of the downtown, having just a few homework items is actually still pretty good.
Okay. Thank you. I guess on my end, one comment on the evaluation matrix would be to make sure we're talking about level of service for whom and for all users. Sort of traditionally, the concept of level of service for private vehicles might be the only purview there, but I would emphasize that we look at level of service to pedestrians and people on foot, people on bike, people in bus, on transit as well. I also just want to emphasize when there's such an exciting project and opportunities in front of us here, and I agree with and want to emphasize the importance of getting out in front of the main curb changes and getting city council's approval to move forward with that to enable the next round of more detailed planning with your team, with the consultant teams, given the tight schedules we have and the opportunities to leverage the money to pay for all of this. So yeah, I think it makes sense. I know it's a challenging process, and I believe we're doing their due diligence with multiple opportunities for collecting feedback from multiple perspectives, including ours. Like we've seen Eric getting a couple chances to look at it and talk about this item, and I appreciate you doing that with other groups around the city as well. So it's really thank you all for the work here. I'm also want to emphasize the importance of making this great, and to the extent providing as few compromises as we can in the safety and comfort of people moving about this corridor by all modes of transportation. So I'm certainly supportive of the proposed amended language in front of us here in terms of emphasizing the separated and dedicated bike facilities. leave it at that for now. Let's see, so open up to public comment at this time. Again, I would ask that if people are interested in speaking, do you please keep your remarks brief to 3 minutes or less. Welcome your public comments now.
We'll start with Zandy Wheeler. Unmute myself here. Happy to be hearing all about this. I want to say one thing to several of the comments. I think there is a great danger to do your job, which is to focus on making this a great street. And I think that there's such sense to not have one block different than the other in terms of traveling by foot or by bike. Obvious. What I'd like you to consider is that we need a great city. And what that means is that when you create great streets, you take into account that you're making decisions, say on parking, and it looks like 67 could go to 73 and might get relocated. And I hear that there's lots of visionaries who think maybe in 30, 40 years, the cars will be non-existent or they'll be floating or there'll be a whatever. But I'd like to see a condition that the recommended to the city council that they look to find and make sure there's excellent signage and that's easily understandable by people in cars, that they can find the parking that's within the couple, 3 blocks of this major improvement to the city. So it's not enough to have a great street. We have to be thinking about a great city. And from what I hear from some people on this panel or the consultants from the city, there is ample space. There's ample unused parking. I've heard that specifically mentioned. I would ask that there be more than a parking study, but there be a commitment to make use of parking within reasonable distance of this great street so that we can have a great city that serves the churches, the Salvation Army, the Burlington Housing, the Chamber of Commerce. There are lots of reasons that people come downtown, and it's not all about people shopping, but there's a lot of services and there's a lot of important things that happen in a city that make it great. And Burlington has a lot of those assets. And I think it's less important whether it's 67 or 73 or 12 per block, but have we really thought about people in cars as much as we've thought about some of these other important people? And I think it's difficult to take up the idea, well, in the November through March time period, there might not be use of this and that, but let's plan for helping people see and find what they need.
Thank you, Mr. Wheeler.
Jason Stuffle.
Hopefully you can hear me pretty well. So great discussion tonight. I really appreciate all of it. I only have just very few points that kind of like the update to the language and that we're really looking at the best options. But I just want to remind everyone about induced demand. If you build for cars and you put 120 spots on Main Street, you're going to have 120 spots filled. If you put 90, you're going to have 90 filled. And so for me, the difference between 90 and 86 is not like, I don't think that's going to make that big of a difference. But, even if we need those 4 spots, there's alternatives. And as I mentioned on Colchester Ave, we narrowed the green belt in some areas to make it so that we could make stuff fit. And I see there's a 7-foot wide green belt on one side, which you could narrow, which I agree. We want green belts and we want, things for drainage, which we could also put underneath the sidewalks and underneath the ground. But unless the actual sidewalks, bike lanes, and road are functioning, it doesn't matter what all the rest of it is, right? If people are getting injured there, if people don't want to use it, they're not going to go down to the parklet or whatever that's there. And so we just have to keep that in mind. And just think of this as a standard going forward for, I would say, Winooski Ave, Pearl Street, North Ave, Pine Street, like things. If we could make this standard all over the city, that would be really amazing. And you would reduce the demand on parking significantly. And so we have to kind of get out of that mindset that we need to keep the current level of service for parking, because if this is built and it's successful, which it will be, the amount of people that will want to or need to park downtown will drastically decrease. Because if people felt they could safely bike downtown, I bet you they would do it, because it's amazing. I park my bike on Church Street directly in front of the building, you know, and you can't do that with a car. You have to park and walk. And so I just think about what people will do once this is built. And, you know, the number one functionality thing is to have each of the transportation modes functioning correctly. And hopefully this is coupled with better public transit. And it really makes a big difference. So thank you tonight for the discussion. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Chair Hogan, we have Jonathan Weber.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for the presentation tonight. Thanks to DPW staff for all your work on this, for the commissioners to your attention on this and the great discussion. Locomotion is very supportive of this project. Generally, we have been for a long time. And for the most part, I think these concepts look great. As you know, though, we're definitely concerned about this shared use path design between Union and Winooski. We hear you that it's an attempt to compromise. In this case, I think it is definitely not a worthwhile compromise. These are extremely low value parking spaces, and the proposed shared use facility creates very real physical danger to users. And I do not think it's unrealistic to say that we would see injuries with this design. We should never accept putting people in physical danger for parking, and to do it for parking spaces that are never used is even worse. So I'm going to speak first about why this shared use path sign is problematic, and then about why these parking spaces are of such little value. So shared use paths work great in some places, right? The Riverside shared use path works great. The waterfront path works great, but this location is not right for a shared use path. One reason is volumes. We see pretty high numbers of users on these streets. And of course, when the infrastructure is improved, when there's a nice green belt with shade, those volumes are going to increase dramatically. And that's especially true with Edmonds School there when that gets out, as Commissioner Vivanco mentioned, or Commissioner O'Neill mentioned, there is a lot of traffic, a lot of kids, they move unpredictably, and it's not going to be a pretty scene on that path. The sort of background issue here is the slope, right? It's a pretty steep street, and that means that you're going to have high differential in user speeds with folks on bikes potentially using that path to go west, since it's a shared use path. And that means they're going to be mixing with folks going much slower uphill and potentially having to pass people walking all at the same time. So that's pretty chaotic. And you mix that slope and the speed with the fact that this is a constrained space. As has been mentioned, it's very close to the properties there. We're going to have rocks and trees. This is not like the waterfront where you would have grass on either side and open areas where folks can, run off the path if they need to. So I do think we would see injuries on this facility, and that would be a real shame. I do also want to say that our concern about the shared use path is really not about the quality of bike facilities. Over and over again, we've heard that we want to prioritize people walking in this project. That's what the community has said. That's what the city has said in its presentation. This shared use path really puts people walking last. It means that people walking, those with disabilities, are going to have to be sort of on their toes all the time, watching for people on bikes going uphill and downhill, navigating, and folks with disabilities who don't have the ability to maybe maneuver as quickly as many others in our community are going to be especially challenged and at risk. So why are these parking spaces such low value? As was heard during this meeting, people don't even know if there's parking there.
Mr. Weber, you're out of time. Could I ask you to conclude your remarks?
Absolutely, yeah. So these are on the eastbound side of the street on the way out of town, which is why people don't park there. They're far from the downtown core, and so they're going to do very little to address the perception of a parking shortage in town. So thanks for your work on this. I think it's a good motion. I hope we can get this resolved.
Thank you.
Chair Hogan, no one else has signed up. public comment, read in his remarks, couldn't be here today, if it's favorable to you.
Sure.
Yep. So this is from the ownership of North Star Sports, JP Casino, and I think others. We appreciate the efforts the city is making in updating its infrastructure. However, we are greatly concerned about our customers' ability to access our business for both sales and service. As e-bikes continue to grow in the marketplace, it is essential that riders have access to both sales and service. Many of our customers come from out of town and are of retirement age. It has only been in the last few years that we have seen that demographic drop or change. As we look forward to net zero emissions, it is imperative that the repair of these products be recognized as essential to move forward with meeting these goals. Individuals cannot carry e-bikes and others that are in need of repair. The carrying weight of any bicycle in disrepair is simply not achievable for most individuals. We spend a great deal of our time loading and unloading bicycles from the back of cars. Of course, individuals will walk several blocks to purchase an item, but not when the item or product cannot be carried in a bag or the weight is significant. We ask parking not be reduced on Main Street so that all individuals have access to both sales and service. Please reach out to the businesses who are located on Main Street. We all have specific needs. Some of us have chosen our locations based on those needs. We hope that those needs are considered when addressing the design of the street, specifically parking. Thank you for listening to our concerns.
All right, thank you.
And at this time, there's no one else signed up for public comment.
All right. So, yeah, as you know, there's a vote warned on this item. We're not looking at regulatory changes at this time. The department is planning to go to City Council on Monday with a request to give the go-ahead on some of the main design and curb width changes, and are requesting the commission support or lack thereof on that. I would welcome a motion if anyone's so inclined.
I'd like to, sorry, Jim, I'd like to make a motion to approve the proposed amended motion that includes the guidance to evaluate the options for the eastbound dedicated, separated, and protected bike lane facilities, and relocate any impacted parking spaces, and have DPW return to the commission and city council with updated plans later this year. Is this additional piece underneath that included in that proposed?
That's for you guys to decide.
So
I just provide, I'm sorry, I hate this PDF program.
Sorry. Okay.
This
Just
is
trying to scroll
this is
it
the
up.
paragraph, yeah, that Commissioner Overby had provided.
Yes, and then to include a proper scoping study to be performed to identify the safest, most functionally efficient, most environmentally sound, and most long-term cost-effective intersections for Main Street in this generational redesign and rebuild of Main Street. So both of those amendments included into the amended, does that, there's a gap there in,
Hold on.
in the motion, that's what, yes. So basically to include my amendment and Commissioner Overby's amendment. I'd like to make that motion.
And I'll second that one.
All right, so we have a motion from Vice Chair Neovaco. It's been seconded from Commissioner Barr. Is there any discussion around that motion?
I just have
Oh,
a question.
yeah.
So you're just proposing that you're going to be doing this scoping study, sorry about that. After the fact of approving the plan.
Sorry, I was trying to
That's okay.
set that up. Can
I
you
know,
repeat
I was,
that?
I misunderstood what was being, so you were proposing from the modification of the proposal, that you're going to do the proper scoping after all of the other commitments have been made for the other design elements.
I think that doing scoping as we would do, ahead of a project starting is challenging at this point, and I would consider an amendment to the proposed amended motion. The intersections can be reviewed and are being reviewed. Any project does the operational analysis of the intersections often in this phase of the work. We are considering whether this is signalized or roundabout at this phase. So our consultants will work on a lot of the other features that are necessary on the road. We have water, sewer, utilities, stormwater, things like that. There's lots of work to be done while they complete this evaluation. This matrix is what would lead us to the decision saying, we need to hold and really look at the roundabouts if that's the direction and the recommendation that comes out of this consideration. Or it would say we would proceed forward with the signalized intersections, and then they would work to complete the design with the middle parts of the corridor that they would have been working on.
Yeah, I think I'm just not comfortable that information shouldn't have been made available as part of the decision-making now, because everything I heard at all of the public sessions when I asked that question about whether there was going to be a consideration of roundabouts as well, it was the signalized decisions that were pretty much in the mix. So I appreciate you're trying to come up with language that feels good and maybe sounds like it's going to result in a reconsideration of this, but I feel like it's just going to be a lot locked in by this decision of approving the plan, and I'm not comfortable with that. I would rather actually have something where there's a specific plan to deal with particularly those 4 dangerous intersections. So that's just me. That's just my. I appreciate you're making a great effort to make it seem like you're going to address these things, but then what happens if basically what seems like it's already happened in the past, that the roundabouts are not favored due to the amount of effort that they take up front in Burlington. It just isn't the culture of innovation that we advertise. And so I appreciate you're making the effort. I don't think it's gonna get me over the decision to not support this as it is. Not enough information, a commitment to those safer intersections. So thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion around that motion? On the phone, Commissioner Montano, or Commissioner Bose?
No comments.
So I have one quick comment. I guess what I heard you say was that putting in there a proper scoping study should be performed at this juncture is likely not.
It's probably not the right word. The evaluation matrix could consider all of the other items that Commissioner Overby listed, but I would maybe name it as the evaluation matrix, which is the scope item that the consultant is working on.
So say a proper evaluation matrix.
That the intersection evaluation matrix also include?
I guess, can I make a friendly amendment if I've already seconded? Not sure I understand Robert's Rules of Order that way. So the point is that we want it to be addressed, and addressing it in a scoping study is likely, in the whole juncture of things, not realistic.
It's not where we are with the design, it's not the right way to describe the work that's being talked about.
Okay. So can I make a friendly amendment to include this change?
My understanding of Robert's rules is that if the motioner and the seconder both agree that it's friendly, that it can stand, and that people can vote to approve or to oppose the adjusted amendment overall. You could also have the chair choose to vote. Somebody could ask the chair to vote specifically on the amendment, which would be to change the language in that section 4. And then you could vote that amendment either up or down. So it's the chair's prerogative if it's friendly to the motion and the seconder.
If it's friendly to us and motioning second, so we could probably.
So I'm open to it. I think it makes sense in this case. So it sounds like the adjusted language is in front of us now, saying the intersection evaluation matrix also include, just confirming that that language is friendly to the,
Also include identifying
Safe.
the safest, most functionally efficient, most environmental. Yeah, so just change to identify to
Include identifying the safest. Instead of to identify, it's identifying.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
little grammar tweak.
This is why I'm an engineer. I apologize.
Even the best of us would have tough time on the fly here.
I could make it smaller so no one else can see it.
That sounds like an engineer.
I think it's also to include, no? The intersection evaluation matrix also to include identifying.
Yes, also to,
How about just include?
Sure.
We've got
There you go.
all options two, boom, 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 the intersection matrix.
There you go.
okay.
I'm still friendly.
I'm friendly to
Okay.
the adjustments of the proposed amended to the third degree.
Sure.
Grammatically amended.
Grammatically amended.
Okay.
All right. I'm just going to read through, make sure we got it. I understand it's, this adjustment's friendly to those, and then we'll take a last round of comments. So we're saying, recommend the city council approve Gray Street's Main Street concept designs proposed curb-to-curb width of 40 feet, reducing from an existing width of 50 to 70 feet, and effectuating the conversion of the on-street parking configuration from diagonal to parallel. That was our language from Public Works. From the commission is tacking on, with strong guidance to evaluate all options to, 1, continue the eastbound dedicated, separated, and protected bike facility on the block between Winooski Avenue and Union Street. 2, relocate any impacted parking spaces to other locations along the corridor, adjacent to the corridor, or removed as a last resort. And 3, have DPW staff return to the commission and city council with updated plans later this year. 4, the intersection evaluation matrix include identifying the safest, most functionally efficient, most environmentally sound, and most long-term cost-effective intersections for Main Street in this generational redesign and rebuild of the Main Street. All right, feeling good about it? The adjustments here are friendly to the motioner and the seconder.
Yes.
Is there any other discussion around this motion?
I have a question. My understanding is that the term scoping study is the term of art in the transportation design and engineering. So I'm using that term not as a transportation engineer, but in the term that is understood by people that do this sort of work in this sort of a major kind of redevelopment. So I'm thinking that this is to make it so that you're basically saying you're going to do the abbreviated local version of some sort of evaluation of these elements. Is that correct? You're not using the scoping study in the context of what transportation engineers normally use when making a decision about a corridor with intersections.
We are using, so the scoping study, you are correct. It is an engineering term to define kind of a typical body of work. You would find like VTrans or the CCRPC have kind of a set of different tasks that a consultant or a municipality would complete to complete what is defined as a scoping study. Scoping studies are used for the next step as it relates to procuring federal grants. And so there are minimum requirements that have to go into what is defined as scoping to be qualified as scoping to kind of sometimes meet those next steps. What we're pulling out is the technical side as it relates to the operational, functional, safety portions of the intersection. The other things that would have gone into scoping, like you mentioned in your email, is some of the other environmental considerations, the environmental impacts of what this footprint might be. There are resource reviews, which are being done through other portions of this design project for the whole corridor and not just for the intersections. And so, we're really just asking, let us take the technical look and bring you those details.
But, and why were the consultants that have been working on this not told to do a scoping study level effort on the corridor and these intersections?
Much of the portions of the network have had various different studies at different points in time, which led us early in the process to thinking that the signalized intersections would be the direction that we would go. The outreach, your outreach, the outreach and feedback that we received from our residents had questioned why the intersections were not being fully evaluated. And so we've added that scope to our consultants' work. It wasn't in their original procurement. This is in response to public feedback. Their findings are not a foregone conclusion. So we are looking at, re-looking at, and continuing to evaluate what these intersections look like as we now work towards a better understanding of what the corridor is, the priorities that our community wants as it relates to the facilities for pedestrians, bicycles, transits, and vehicles. And that'll add to the intersection review.
And why was it not provided to the consultants that these were some of the?
Chair Hogan, please call the question. Please call the question. There's been a motion put on the floor and it has been seconded. And we have heard this particular set of concerns raised several times. I would like the question called for a vote.
So the chair, if a called question needs a 2/3 majority to move to a vote and to table conversation. So there would need to be a vote on calling the question, and if there's a 2/3 majority, then the vote would go to a vote without further discussion.
Sure. Is that a question on the procedural?
I'm just mostly finished. I just wanted to ask why they were not told to consider the intersections that were very high crash locations as before now. But I'm fine calling the question.
Yeah, and if there's no further conversation at the commission,
We're
the
good.
commission could just go to a vote.
Let's go to a vote. We'll start on the phone, please. Commissioner Montano.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Bose.
Aye.
Commissioner Barr.
Aye.
Commissioner Overby.
No.
Vice Chair O'Neill Vivanco.
Aye.
Aye for myself. Motion passes 5-1. Thank you for that.
Thank you,
for
and
the
we will
robust
see you
discussion.
again.
Yeah, we'll see you soon. All right. Moving forward, item 6 on our agenda, BSD school travel plan.
The new. Okay.
Great, we have Public Works Engineer Philip Peterson here, and I am excited to also introduce, we also have Julia Ursaki, who's our new transportation engineer, who is
Welcome.
filling a new position for us. This is really an exciting opportunity for us to expand our capacity in what we understand to be a commission priority and a council priority to better redesign our transportation systems for the future. So thank you, Julia, welcome.
Thank you.
And I've asked Philip to be expeditious, given we know you also have review and executive session tonight, so
Yes.
we'll keep things moving.
Keep it brief. It's serendipitous that we're discussing the Burlington School District travel plan with Julia, because Julia was the person who wrote it.
Yes, so before I came to the city, I worked for Du Bois and King and had the privilege of working on this travel plan with folks from the city and the CCRPC, so I was an author of the travel plan itself.
So it's great, and I'm very excited to work with her more directly on it, and we're happy to discuss it. So I did present before we collected data and before we moved forward about a year ago, April of last year, and so we're going to get right into it. The draft plan is published. This particular presentation is also published on the agenda webpage, so all these links are available to the public. It's been published for a while. June 3rd is going to be the last day for comments. And so that's kind of the plan for that. So basically, just to give the 10,000-foot overview, the BSD travel plan is broken up into 5 different sections. The introduction, recommendations, which is really the meat and potatoes of what DPW would be concerned with, community engagement, travel plans, which is part of the recommendations, and then there's the appendix. And for the community engagement, Julie, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, I will. So the community engagement we did for the travel plan were a few different efforts. We did online surveys, a separate one for the K through 8 cohort, and then another one for the high school. And then we did walk audits, also in 2 forms. The project team led walk audits for every campus. And we also created a DIY walk audit tool that parents could submit different issues they encountered as they're walking their kids to school.
Take a picture and
Take a picture and upload it and send it directly to us. The project team also interviewed the principals at all 10 of the schools that were part of this travel plan. And so all of that input is what fed the many recommendations that are part of this plan.
this is what we're really here for, and that's the recommendations. As Chapin described, in the interest of time and efficiency, this is what we're going to focus on. And the recommendation section is really what's going to inform future DPW projects. So basically, the sections and the recommendations part are broken up into 4 different categories. Transit related, which is school district and GMT led efforts. Crossing guards, which used to be just public works, but what we're hoping to do is to utilize the school district as well. So it'll be a combined effort. And then infrastructure, which is broken up into 2 other categories. Public works, which is right-of-way infrastructure, and then on-campus infrastructure, which is school district-led, and then programming, which is school district-led.
So we had several transit-related recommendations. As Philip mentioned, these are led by the school and GMT. One of them is to establish quarterly meetings between the school and the transit center. The biggest issue that we saw was that GMT created their 4-month schedule in April, and the school didn't decide what hours the schools would go until June, so they had that disconnect on when students would actually be going in and out of school and when buses would be scheduled to be there. The other big issue for GMT was behavioral issues on buses. The GMT policy is to kind of kick off whoever is causing an issue on the bus, which obviously doesn't work for school-age children riding on the bus. So our recommendation there was to have BSD work with GMT to address behavioral issues specific to kids on the bus, and possibly even create a position for staff to ride on some of the school tripper routes, if not every day, some days, to help establish expectations for students riding bus.
GMT staff are not trained to work on behavioral issues. BSD staff are. Similarly, with crossing guards, one suggestion that we had that seems like a pretty good one is a dual school district positions. Paraeducators could work as crossing guards. They come to work early, they do their crossing guard work, they go do their school duties. In the afternoon, they do their crossing guard duties, and perhaps they have an after-school program that they go into. Crossing guards aren't necessarily trained to deal with behavioral issues, just like GMT bus drivers aren't necessarily trained, but paraeducators are. So this is an opportunity, and the school district seems interested in that. Also better communication between the school district and DPW around crossing guard requests, and making sure that we're monitoring those high priority intersections to ensure that consistent crossing guards are there. And this is it. This is the meat and potatoes of everything.
So there are a lot of recommendations, a lot of infrastructure-specific recommendations in the report, and we can only kind of touch on a handful of them tonight, but I would definitely encourage whoever's interested to review the report through the link at the beginning of this presentation. The main categories of infrastructure recommendations are up there, but we'll talk through each one on a separate slide. And kick it off with shared use paths. So we know there's one in Shiflety Park underway that Parks and Rec is working on to connect CP Smith and Hunt. Another recommendation that we had is looking at a path that connects the 127 bike path to North Ave for better connectivity to BHS. And finally, looking at the path on the Champlain Elementary campus that connects to Birchcliff.
Also looked at bicycle improvements, and there's a variety of things that we can do now and some other things that we can do later. One project that we're looking at right now, saw it in the consent agenda, Plattsburgh Ave is part of the CY22 street reconstruction program, and we're trying to take advantage of that situation and possibly put in some bike lanes on Plattsburgh Ave. So combining current efforts with what we want to do. And then there's other opportunities to look at that maybe a little bit more long-term planning, greenways on Goss, Farrington, and Heinberg. And then we also talked about accessible bike options in other areas like, I forget.
On Ethan Allen Parkway, something that's a little more safer elementary age students, especially during pickup and drop off, which is really chaotic in front of CP Smith. And then also looking at options for South Union Street near Edmonds for students getting in and out of campus.
Another similar to bike improvements is intersection and crossing improvements. There's really low-end fixes like changing out signs, improving, installing fluorescent yellow, green school crosswalk signs. Others smaller improvements, maybe removing parking on Rose Street and North Street to improve sightline conditions. Those are things that we can do right away, pretty much. And then there's other things that are proposed through Plan BTV Walk Bike, raised intersections, things that are going to take a little bit more time and are cost prohibitive. So those are things that we'll have to look at. A lot of things to look into. Anything else? Okay.
Multimodal corridor improvements are another kind of bigger, longer-term recommendation that we had. Two in particular that were identified as part of the study are Archibald Street and Shelburne Street. So looking at making those two not just one place, but the entire corridor more accessible for people to cross the street, ride their bike, and get to school safely.
Right. Some new sidewalks, some suggestions for new sidewalks, the north side of Star Farm Road, the east side of Ethan Allen Parkway between Ira Lane and the trail entrance. Other beefier projects, Vest Haven, Morgan, Algrid, and Pennington, Cottage Grove, Waldo. I had to practice saying that a few times. Green Acres and Cross. So there are some opportunities to take advantage of some new sidewalk projects.
So a couple new crosswalks recommended as part of this study, again, to help students get to school in a more safe and convenient way. Adding a crosswalk on the southern leg of the Shore, North Ave, and Heinberg intersection. Also a crosswalk at the intersection of Walnut and Willow, which is near the Integrated Arts Academy. We saw a lot of students crossing there. And then finally, a mid-block crossing of Pearl Street at William Street. There's not another crossing there within, I think, 1,000 feet.
There are some on-campus improvements that the school district will have to take the lead on. These are just two suggestions. Once again, I encourage you to read through the entire plan. So one example is Flynn. We want to improve one-way signage and add one-way arrow pavement markings at the school circle. Another is with Edmonds. Create a policy to dismiss students at the rear entrance onto Maple Street. And that we would be designating some vehicle loading zones, maybe even adding some no parking zones that could be time limited. These are all things that we'll have to look at once the school district kind of gets their policies in order and how they want to handle that, how we can support them.
There are just a handful of recommendations for moving GMT bus stops near schools to locations that will make it easier for students to get off the bus and make it to campus. One is on North Ave out front of BHS. Another one is also on North Ave near Hunt Middle School. and those will take some coordination with GMT. And obviously this one has a shelter, and moving that will be a bit more costly and long-term.
Long term. So a little bit more of a bold recommendation, you actually described this a lot better earlier than I did, is creating a possible one-way that could be temporary. There's a school in Winooski, St. Xavier, that has a temporary time-limited one-way situation. We can look at that and possibly engage the CCRPC. Jason Charest with the CCRPC has joined us. And they can help in looking at perhaps a demonstration project, review parking signage on Main between Willard and Union. I know there's some crossing situations there on Willow that we had discussed earlier that are of concern as well.
Yeah, that sounds good.
So once again, the draft recommendation or the draft plan is on the CCRP website at this link. And June 3rd is our last day for comments. So I encourage folks to take a look at that, and anyone in the public can do that as well. I'm not sure when the school district is presenting this to the school board, but they do have it published on their website as well. So what's the next steps? We are going to get together as a team, review those public comments, develop a final report. I'll probably bring it back here to the commission so that folks kind of know what the plan is. There will probably be opportunities for other studies.
And those can be supported by the CCRPC's UPWP with the city.
And that'll lead to some final plans, probably some traffic regulation changes and several potential construction projects, and it'll be time and resource dependent. And hopefully we went fast enough, Chapin. Did we go fast enough?
Thank you.
Questions?
All right, thank you for that. Yeah, again, to fellow commissioners, we are not seeking action on this at this time.
No action.
Reminder to all, comments by June 3rd. We'll cycle through our commissioners and see if we have any quick reactions at this point. Commissioner Montano.
Hello, thank you, everyone. I think this is an awesome report, and I look forward to digging in a little bit more. I was just looking through it very briefly now, kind of picking out some things that I found interesting and something that I was hoping would, that did come up, but like the concern of like winter, like I was just looking at one survey, like looking at mode usage between fall, winter, and then spring. And unsurprisingly, whereas a good chunk of the Burlington Public Schools body bikes to school in fall and spring, it's essentially absent in the winter. So does the report go into any specific recommendations about maintenance of these paths and everything that essentially that is proposing to be done in order to make biking and walking a better way of navigating to school in all seasons? So folks aren't driving, and we don't need to take more of those actions regarding like the road itself to keep kids safe, but really keeping kids safe by making a method that works in all conditions.
Right. You make an excellent point. At this stage of the game, no, we would want to engage our snow removal team in terms of what plans we want to do. I have attended the Winter Cycling Congress, so I'm super interested in winter cycling, and it is something that's very possible to do. And there are techniques out there, and we'll definitely be looking at those things when the time is right.
Thank you. That was it for me.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Bose.
Yeah, this is really interesting. I'm also looking forward to digging into it a little bit more. Could you just explain one thing? I perhaps I missed it in your presentation. Could you just explain what you meant by the longer term sort of planning around the bus stops? You used a couple of examples. Could you just explain, sorry, what is the change that is proposed with the bus stops?
So the one near BHS is to move it closer to the intersection of Institute Road and North Ave. And then the one near Hunt Middle School is to move it. Right now it's in front of someone's yard, and when it's raining, kids will congregate and actually go under their porch.
Right.
next to their front door. So we heard that from the principal. They've had a lot of dialogue. We're proposing to move it just one down.
Yeah, one down.
And so in moving those structures, you're talking about just a move of the structure? Is it a rebuild, or is it's just a simple move?
Oh, sorry.
Okay,
It's just a sign.
But the one
Okay.
in front of BHS is the whole structure.
okay, great. All right, that's it. I'm really eager to kind of dig into this a bit more. So thank you for this.
Thank you. Commissioner Overby.
I'm happy that the Department of Public Works is working on this as well, and I'd look forward to looking at the material in there. So I got a good overview, but I feel like I need to read the proposal before I have any comments further. But I appreciate you're doing the work on this. It's sort of interesting that Public Works is doing that, working with the schools. You might not have thought that you would have thought the schools would have been leading the charge on that, but it's great to know that this is going on. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Barr.
Thank you. This is a lot of great work. I look forward to digging in as well. I'm especially pleased with the collaboration, as we just talked about, between DPW and GMT and BSD, and working all of these things together. Because to me, transportation is just as important as the parking, just as important as maintaining our streets and our sewers and everything. And I'm very excited about us looking at ways to help students get to their campuses safer. And the ideas of moving bus stops and creating better shared paths and connecting the 127. I'm very excited about that one because I use that one quite a bit myself. So I'll be looking forward to what comes out of that. But very good. Thank you.
Vice Chair O'Neill-Vivanco.
Okay. My last kid. I've got one more year at Edmonds Middle. I pray that some of this will actually be in effect, especially, looking at South Union Street. I think, Chapin, were you even on, maybe you were still on locomotion when I started to impale myself on signs on Union Street. I don't know. So good work. And I think this is interesting collaboration, because when I was on the PTO, it was, well, that's physical plant. Well, no, that's the city. That's this. So this collaboration, I think, is really important, and to bring GMT on board as well is great. As you said, that when I saw that the comments are, they close on June 3rd. So I have so many emails from the school, from two schools, from BHS and from Edmonds Middle. And I'm going to ask other Burlington School District parents here, did you get any notification about this? I just found it, it was posted just last
Right.
week on the BSD website, not, so for the whole thing, but I haven't gotten any notices from the schools. So maybe this goes to Jason, I don't know, or to you to communicate to all of the schools that this needs to be in their newsletter. So parents, because otherwise it's buried in here. You
Yeah,
have to go look for it.
We'd be completely transparent with that. The school district has had some turnover with positions. So the gentleman that I was working with is Marty
I know.
Okay.
Yep. Yes, no, so I recognize that, but
Yep.
but I was like, oh my God, I got caught flat-footed. So I think, and again, I don't know if it would be Jason or you, to make sure that the schools push this out, because this is really great, rich information. And I would love the idea of having every bus stop by one of our schools that we have, it has a shelter. I mean, give our kids some dignity. That they're running on some person's porch to stay dry. What more information do we need than that we need a shelter? So I love that you're digging into this, and thank you. Look forward to more of this in the future.
Thank you. You can look forward to plenty of comments from us once we get through this document. I started reading it, but there's plenty more to go. I guess a couple quick reactions. I would suggest in your list there's a table in there about the bus service. It's focused on the school trip routes and what times they arrive or depart relative to first bell and so forth. That's just also including the general non-school tripper buses as well. I'll give you an example. Route 6 goes right past Edmonds. That's the one that I take my kids on when I take the bus. It's one of the modes of transportation we use to get there. And it's mattered when that service has been switched around and thinned out, and then hopefully going back from GMT. It used to be that we were way early in elementary school, but middle school was probably right on time. Now we're probably pretty close to ideal time for the elementary school, but the middle school might be a smidge late if they're on that bus. I don't know, but listen, it's a fine option, and there are routes all over the place going past all our schools. In addition to these, I guess towards that end, for every picture like this with those buses on the curb, I probably have 5 pictures on my phone of those buses that can't reach the curb because there are private vehicles hogging the curb there. I think our work on the signage that's there is not done. And the procedures, it's another thing, the messaging really needs to be there from the schools, and I will get that in my comments. That's in this document as well. But for instance, as of the last time I looked, a couple weeks ago, the parent handbook for the middle school, Edmonds Middle School, is still encouraging people to drop off on Union Street, for example, there. That's a bus. And the signage hasn't changed that. The formal messaging from the school hasn't changed that. In the Edmonds Elementary, I don't know if this has changed recently, but last I looked, there wasn't a dedicated parent handbook with like Edmonds-specific procedures. I couldn't find that anymore on their website. It was sort of a general district-wide elementary school handbook. Something to sort of keep in mind in the messaging and all of this of what's recommended, what's accepted. And Public Works has a role in sort of the signage and regulations to support that as well. Question, can you remind me, like, when the walk bike audits were being recommended or solicited, when was that in this process?
That was in the beginning, which I think was November of 2020.
Gotcha. Okay. Certainly, I'll second what Vice Chair O'Neill-Vivanco said about communicating that this draft is out there and open for comments for the next couple of weeks as well. It's a busy time with school communications, but we'd love to see this in there somewhere in the queue of things. I think that, I guess one other thing that let's toss out there publicly for the record here is I would recommend looking at and trying to pursue CATMA membership for the school district. Right. So CATMA lists the city as a member, but I feel like the school district is such a unique entity within the city of Burlington, sort of employees overall. It's sort of worth its separate treatment from, in partnership with CATMA on that. Not only because it's probably, if you flip through the, the pages of our city review, the school district has more pages of employees than any other department. And they're also sort of stewards for these centers of population that come and go. So not only like the numbers of staff on, faculty and staff on payroll, but like the stewards of how thousands and thousands of students come and go. Yeah, I would emphasize sort of working in plugging travel demand management, the TDM stuff with the school district, and planting that seed there and encouraging us all to be thinking about options for how we get around.
Right, and that's definitely a school district led, and that would be probably in the programming section.
Yeah, there is a whole programming section that we actually forgot to touch on
we didn't really touch
about
on that
just different programs that each school can provide to get more people walking and biking. So,
and some schools are more aggressive and assertive with those than others.
that was actually an issue that we identified as almost an equity issue because schools with like really active parent volunteers who can lead those initiatives had better programming than those that didn't.
That's correct.
Very true. Okay, yep, that's all I've got for now. Put this in my queue for reading over the next couple of weeks, but thanks so much for the walkthrough tonight.
Super. Thank you.
While we're on it, let's just check and see if we got any public comments on this
Sure.
item,
Of course.
as long as we warned it on our agenda here. Mr. Goulding, do we have anyone on the phone interested in speaking at public comment here?
It does not appear that anyone is signed up for interested public comment right now.
Going once, going twice. All right, we will close item 6. Thank you so much
Thank you.
for
Thank
the
you.
presentation.
Thanks.
Moving forward, item 7, Marketplace Garage Assessment.
Team. All right, and I told this team to be even quicker. We know we don't have an agenda item here, but I am really also excited to introduce another fabulous member of our team who hasn't been here tonight, Matt Fitzpatrick,
Woohoo.
who is
Welcome.
stewarding a really great renaissance in our physical plant in our garages. So, welcome Jeff Paget and Matt.
Yeah, so Jeff Paget, Division Director for Parking and Traffic, and I will be quick. Go through these slides. I know you guys got them in your packet. Nothing's really changed. Date changed, but that's not relevant. The long and the short of it is I wanted to make everybody aware of the major upcoming renovations to Marketplace Garage. It is aging. It is 50 years old, and it has worked hard. In 2014, there was a number of planning studies done, engineering studies by Hoyle Tanner. Between 15 and 18, a number of those improvements were made, but it got to a point where the next sort of step of improvements was shutting the whole garage down, which was untenable. Then we got into COVID, and then we brought them in. We brought Hoyle Tanner in again in 2019, 2020, to assess, okay, what can we do, sort of a short-term Band-Aid, to get us the next 3 to 5 years so we can begin this planning process of what's the next vision of the Marketplace Garage. So that's where we're at now. And this is basically what we're doing. We're repairing beams, we're patching decks, we're fixing spall. The sort of most visible thing that's happening is the brick facade on the western face is actively decaying. And we're really concerned about it. And we've been trying to find contractors to come in and fix it, but it's too big for the small ones and too small for the big ones. So we wrapped it into this structural project, so hopefully we can get a contractor to come in and do this whole suite of work. And this work is only going to consume up to 80 spaces in the garage, which is a significant number of spaces out of 350 or so spaces. But the garage stays open. So this is basically a timeline. It's out to bid tomorrow, this week?
Friday, yeah.
Friday. So we're getting bids back right around your next, before the next Public Works Commission meeting. So we wanted to be sure you guys are aware of what's going on with this, because we'll be going to the Board of Finance, getting approval. This is going to be, and then we're hoping, sometime between July and October to get this thing built out. Count on the busiest weekend possible, and we'll be in there. But this is major. This is $500,000 worth of work. So we've been working with the CT office to set up, some financing over time. But it's going to be another burden on our already taxed garage operations. But necessary to keep it alive. So anyway, so this gets us to a point where we can start to make a decision the next 3 to 5 years about, do we pour more money into this facility and keep it going? Do we tear it down and build a new facility? What makes the most sense for the community? So those are the basic questions we need to address. That's it. I mean, that's the long and short of it is, we got an old car. Do we put new exhaust system in, or do we trade it in? That's sort of the debate we're at. But it's very, very expensive. The rebuild is probably $20 million. But at this point, we're looking at nearly that in ongoing if we kept it going. So we're in an interesting challenge. So, and Matt's done a great job. He's picked this up. He's working with the consultants, and he's putting the bid docs out, and he'll manage the whole thing. So pretty excited about that.
Great, thank you for that. Let's check with my fellow commissioners here, so we can comments or questions on this one? Commissioner Barr?
I think it's a long time coming. It's going to be a difficult decision. When it was built so many years ago, it was probably built at a time when things were different. And I know that's not up for discussion necessarily right now, what the future is going to hold, but I think it's a good plan to at least make it safe, because safety is going to be the key. You don't want to make the city liable for somebody to come shopping, somebody to come downtown and do something, and then go in there and have it fall on them. They'd rather have no parking than to have parking that crushes your car. So I think it's a good path. I'm in support.
All right, thank you. To the phone, Commissioner Montano.
No comments. This was a really good presentation, and I understand that this is like totally critical work. Like the age of the parking garage structure is like quite clear, and it's a lot. It's like the first thing that people see when they're visiting the city, and sort of like coming in with that idea that like, oh man, I'm not really being like watched out for when I could actually see sort of the damage here. Is something. So I definitely think this work is critical. But like looking forward beyond this, right? It's kind of like, what do we want to look, what should this facility look like in the future? And how is it accessible for people who don't have cars? How do we make it a place where we're welcoming people into the downtown core, and they could drop off whatever mode of transportation they have, and then they could go on. So certainly there's a lot to look forward to in the future, but I think this is a very important contract. So thank you for all this work.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Bose?
Yeah, no real comments from me either. This is compelling and sobering. So thank you for this work.
Indeed, thank you. Commissioner Overby?
I second Commissioner Bose's comment. It's compelling and daunting. And I appreciate you just going forward and helping to make it happen. So I expect it to be a lot of work, and thank you for starting the process.
Vice Chair O'Neill Vaca?
I think definitely this 3 to 5 year, piece of getting the garage at least into a more suitable state, and then evaluating what's next. I look forward to that discussion. So go for it. Thank you for stewarding this.
I do want to make it clear, we're talking about a 3 to 5 year horizon, but we do have money in the budget for fiscal '22 that I'm going to present tomorrow night, specifically for beginning the planning process. So we're not, fiscal '23. So we're not waiting 3 to 5 years to get going on this.
Oh, yeah.
We
Yeah,
got
yeah.
money in the budget to start thinking like that.
That's great. Yeah, because once we get the school bond out, we'll all be walking.
Thank you. So to clarify what you just said, in your FY23 budget proposal, we're putting in some planning
I've
for this
specifically
process.
allocated dollars in a consultant line item for a planning process.
In the
Not
meantime-
end all be all engineering, but to get the public outreach, get some comments about what's the highest best use of that space, that type of thing. Scoping.
In this roughly $500,000 that we're talking about here for like near term sort of has to happen stuff, is that planned sort of, it's based on the timing of that, is that planned to be spent next year?
That, we hope to get this construction done by October.
Okay. Nowish.
Yeah, we're not messing around.
Oh, that's right, you're posting the bid.
Yeah, we got
We go now.
Yeah.
All right,
Cool.
do it.
All right.
Thank you for the update.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Oh, I guess I should stop sharing my screen.
Should we just check real quick, make sure there's anyone interested in public comment on this item before we officially close it out?
No one for public comment.
All right, you're clear.
Great.
Welcome, and thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Assistant Director Paget. All right, moving forward to director's reports.
All right. I'll be quick. So every year, commission terms end and applications for new folks to participate in this fabulous commission present itself. We do have 2 openings for this coming round, so we want to encourage members of the public, if you're interested in serving on the Public Works Commission, that applications are due this Friday. We've talked about Main Street. I've provided an update on the Champlain Parkway in here and an update on a chlorination incident that we had on April 28th, where we briefly introduced higher than normal chlorine levels into our distribution system. We have done after action report, after incident report, and we are still working through a number of issues at the water plant, specifically related to our SCADA system, and making sure that that is operating normally as it should. Nicole Loesch, our senior planner, has moved to another position within the city. As hard as it is to say, she is, as a grants director at the clerk treasurer's office, is going to be working to secure federal dollars and other grant funding for our work and all of the city work. So we want to thank her for her tremendous work over 15 years for our department, achieving many, many successes, and wish her great success at the CT office. We've had a number of meetings with her this week and are continuing that collaboration in a different fashion. We talked a lot about the construction season having started. Rob has worked with the teams to update the construction portal. It's been a very valuable communications tool for us already. Feel free to reach out with any questions and refer members of the public to that resource. And you will also see, just in conclusion, that as part of our annual review for the city engineer and myself, we've put together a status update on our 22 work plan. Last summer with you all, we laid out what our priorities were. We've told you how we're progressing with those priorities, which in many ways is quite successful. And hopefully that's helpful for your review. And with that, I'll answer any questions in the next section.
All right, thank you for that. Go to Commissioner Communications here. Start on the phone. Commissioner Montano.
No comments. Thank you.
All right. Commissioner Bose.
Nothing from me. Thank you.
All right. Commissioner Overby.
I just had questions on the director's report.
Check your microphone.
Oh, thank you very much. I just had 2 questions about the director's report. There was a mention on of the Intervale Road Path grant for $1 million. I know the Intervale Road has been worked on and planned for. Is there any more information than that you have?
The plan, is to install a shared use path on the west side of Intervale Road, from the top, from Riverside Avenue down to the end of the paved section. And there is some additional stormwater work that we're looking to tie in, and the state is planning an improvement of the crossing, the railroad crossing itself. So that will be, we'll work to coordinate that work. And as you all know, there's also some significant pavement deterioration on the corridor. And so we will either be looking at a significant patching or repaving in the coming years.
The page I was referring to is on that pedestrian safety and injury data slide. It says we recently secured a $1 million grant for an Intervale Road path.
Yep.
And a $300,000 grant for Penny Lane path. I just know I have.
Oh, the Penny Lane path was what you're asking about?
Well, no, I'm asking about the Intervale Road specifically, that $1 million. So we've gotten $1 million toward the work on that path.
Correct.
Okay. That's been, a few people have been contacting me about that because it's so heavily used for people to get down to the gardens, and that railroad intersect, it's not a good shape road.
No.
So that's great that there's $1 million.
Yeah. We are very excited about that work as well.
Toward that, so congratulations on that. The diagram that's right next to that has something about activity by year, pedestrian safety and injury data. I cannot understand those numbers. Maybe there's something that I should ask you separately, but it looks like a great little downward spiral, but what are those numbers?
Commissioner Overby, you're referring, I think, to the construction presentation presentation that I've been giving to the NPAs and
Pedestrian safety and injury data.
exactly, yeah. And I had that chart in there. Folks often ask about how pedestrian safety efforts are going in the city. I've been getting a lot of that feedback online specifically. So one of the things I would try to do, you referenced the Intervale grant. I tried to capture some of the big things we've been working on to kind of capture the efforts that the department's undertaken. In addition, I from the BPD data dashboard, which you can find on their website, I tried to pull where the using help from others in the department, where injuries related to crash were trending in the city. They appear to be trending down, even if crashes have generally held steady at some of the intersections. Injuries have gone down that are associated with those crashes. Just a data point I wanted to share with the public if it were to come up. It didn't make it in the presentation that I think you saw Ward 2 and 3, but it was in the overall presentation. That's why we included it in this.
So these are just pedestrian injuries that have gone from whatever 147 in 2012 down to 29 in 2022.
29 year to date, and if I recall, it's any injury related to a crash. So if motor vehicle driver, that would be included if they were injured in a crash from another motor vehicle driver, bicyclists, pedestrians.
Yeah, I'll look at it. I just couldn't understand what this was because it wasn't clear to me, particularly because I had already looked at the numbers from 2012 to 2016 that were provided as part of the VTrans data, exactly, on Main Street, and there seems to be, these numbers just I didn't realize they were the same things. Thank you for that.
I don't know if they are the same things. I don't know that I think the VTrans data that you're referring to is specifically high crash intersection location data, if I recall.
Right, but the number of injuries were listed, and so these numbers look very low compared to the numbers for just Main Street for those same years. That's all.
Got it.
I can check with you separately.
Yep, okay.
Otherwise, no commissioner comments separately.
All right. Commissioner Barr.
So as per usual, I think that the streets are in really good shape as far as cleaning. I just want to give acknowledgement and kudos to the teams that are out there sweeping, and hopefully there's not too many cars to tow, but I mean it looks really good out there. I also wanted to point out or make it for the record that just acknowledgement that Bob Elberry, a longtime serving member of this commission, passed away recently, and I think his service is going to be May 27th?
28th.
28th?
Yes.
May 28th. So there's something that probably can be provided for anybody that might want to go to that.
Anybody who's interested in information on Bob's service can call Public Works at 802-863-9094.
And how many years was he? I mean,
Decades.
The longest serving.
26?
The longest serving, maybe?
Yes, he served decades on the commission and then worked for BED, Burlington Electric Department, for decades. The man lived and breathed Burlington for his entire life.
Service to this community was outstanding and above and beyond. So I just wanted to acknowledge that for the minutes.
Thank you, Jim. We'll make sure to include that.
Thank you. Vice Chair O'Neill-Vivanco.
First of all, thank you again so much for the staff's work on working through the Great Streets issue. I really appreciate that.
Okay.
Question about Institute Road, BHS, and North Beach. I had to go pick up my youngest, who is doing track at BHS, and it was, one of those gorgeous days. The traffic along Institute Road, I think because there's less student traffic to slow things down, it was like a freeway. Cars were moving quite fast from North Avenue, that short span to the entrance to the park. There were a lot of cars. God, I sound like one of those ladies. What are those cars doing parked over there? But, I wonder, and I know it happens over the summer, is there any way for the city to capture revenue or the school district to capture, not that we could have a bake sale to deal with the school building, but it's not even overflow parking. It's interesting how people will park at BHS because it's free and then walk down to North Beach. So I don't know if there could be any machination of charging for that parking, you know, as I was sitting,
Right.
you know. with the-
Parks and the schools are talking about that.
Okay, that's, I know, because I felt like North Beach is a parks thing, the parking, surface parking is DPW, but then it's BSD, so, anyway, thanks.
Yes.
That's it.
Okay.
Great, thank you for that. And thank you for the update on the chlorination issue. I just want to commend you. I did get news of that by multiple channels that day, and I appreciate the outreach on that one. Yeah, I guess nothing further from my end. So with that said, where are we at?
Motion to adjourn?
Well, not so fast.
Yeah.
There.
Motion to enter executive
We-
session.
But we'd
We-
still adjourn this. though.
Concluding,
Do we have to adjourn this, or do we have to
we've
move
concluded, we're concluding our commissioner communications, and I would welcome a motion to enter executive session for the purpose of director and city engineer annual reviews.
So moved.
We have a motion from Commissioner Bose. Thank you for that.
Second.
We have a second from Commissioner Barr. Is there any discussion around that motion? All right, so now we'll go to a vote then, to the phone. Commissioner Montano.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Bose.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Barr.
Aye.
Thank you. Commissioner Overby.
Aye.
And Vice Chair O'Neill Vivanco.
Aye.
Aye for myself. We are entered into executive session. We're sort of,
Right, so tonight is an interesting one in that we have remote commissioners. And
Yeah.
so we haven't had a full conversation, but I think, sir, if you'd be willing, what we'll do is we'll pause the recording and we will continue to use the remote connection here. Rob, if you can make sure that there are no members.